What does it really take to build a successful client-side project management business while staying true to the craft? Welcome to the Mastt Video Leadership Series. I'm Rebecca Thomas, and today I'm joined by Dr. Greg Usher, Adjunct Research Fellow at the University of Southern Queensland, Company Manager at Beca. Greg has spent his career asking the hard questions about how we deliver projects better, and today we get to hear the answers. Greg, welcome.
Hey Rebecca, thank you for having me today.
So I first of all want to start off with a question around your career. So you've had an absolutely fascinating career spanning client-side project management, research, and most recently building and leading CQG Consulting through to its acquisition at Beca. Can you take us through your journey and what's kept you so passionate about staying in this industry?
Yeah, thanks Rebecca. It's interesting to reflect on it. I think one of the first things you might expect from a project manager is that I had a very clear career plan and I've worked that plan from start to finish, and nothing could be further from the truth, to be honest. I think like many in the industry, we get into project management because it makes sense at the time, and generally because someone thrusts a project at us and says, congratulations, you're now a project manager. And that's certainly what happened to me. So my background is engineering and design. So I did have a business doing house plans and working with a company called Clarendon Homes, their design manager. And I basically got given a project and said, can you run that? And I found I really enjoyed it. It just fit with the way that I viewed the world. It fit with everything I enjoyed about construction. So really, landed in that space. Like, I guess many people, when they start out their career, you start to look at, what is happening in that space and how do people do stuff in that space. And at that stage, project management was really almost in its infancy. I mean, as a discipline and a profession, project management's only about 70 years old. Before that, things got done, but no one ever documented how they were doing it. So it was actually the Polaris project, I think back in the 1950s, the missile project by the United States Defence Force, where they first started documenting how do project managers do what they do. So, I bought into that and I got involved in, building the Gantt charts and, following through the iron triangle and all this stuff, which we're told to do as project managers. And as my career progressed, I found more and more that a lot of that didn't quite fit very well. It makes sense to talk about these things, and it certainly does help in terms of building frameworks and guiding people through. But a lot of the foundational principles were not correct. They were based around the development of production management for factories, and it just doesn't work in an environment like project management where things just happen, that all over the place that you weren't expecting, you can't plan for. So that, I guess, that was the start of my journey. I absolutely loved project management. I've pretty much been a consultant since the day I walked out of first round of uni. I enjoy it because every single day is a challenge. You can plan all you want, but that is not what's going to happen. And so, being in the project management space in particular is at the forefront of having to be constantly thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to fix that? What are my options? What do they look like? What's the best outcome here? And so, we've got all sorts of tools to help us manage that. It's not a dark art. We do have systems and frameworks to do that, but I think it's the challenge that you never know what comes next. And so, because of that, you never get to the point where you sort of sit back and say, well, I've got this managed, I'm all good from here. So, every day you got to push yourself to the next thing. Yeah, staying in the consultancy certainly has been interesting for me. I think, again, it's the same sort of thing. You bounce around between different clients. It's not unusual to, even today, had 4 client meetings and each of them are about different projects and different things. So, you're constantly sort of reassessing how everything's going and how you manage that. I guess it's probably worth noting my role, and I'm currently in now Beca, 2 weeks in. But before that, CQG, I was the CEO for CQG, but I didn't build that business. That was built by a lady called Patrice Brown, who ran it for 23 years, and I actually came in as part of the succession planning for that. But the consultancy space for me is probably the most exciting world to be in terms of a career, because you never really know what you're going to get tomorrow, and that's what I love. I wouldn't be in project management or consultancy if I didn't like living on the edge like that.
And so now that if you are able to talk about this, now that you've completed the acquisition, how did that whole journey sort of pan out? Was that a very difficult process?
I'm going to say no, not difficult. Again, I'm coming at this from the world of project management. So to me, it was just another project, and the nature of project management is it's a generalist skill. You just apply it where you need to apply it. It's not like, being a scientist where you have to focus on one thing and one thing all the time. I found the process really good. And I think that started from the fact that both sides of the equation were both very aligned on culture and values. And so there was no sort of rub points in that. I mean, there was, difficult conversations to have as you would with any sort of acquisition, but we both value the same thing, and that's starting with the integrity of the business, the people that we have. We both understand that we're a professional services business, and so that completely relies on our people to deliver, because we're not building something, so it's got to be our people that deliver it. And so it was good in that way, I think, to find an organisation that closely aligned with us in terms of our values. At CQG, it's been around for 23 years, but it's spent a lot of time. It's an environmental consultancy, so very, very attached to country. Does a lot of work with traditional owners, traditional custodians, do a lot of work, obviously, in the environmental and ecology space. So very deep connections to the environment, to the people, and also the local and regional communities where the business has been built in central Queensland for 23 years. So, and those sort of things were very much the forefront in the discussion. And I would suggest, we never got there, but I would suggest that, if there was misalignment on any of those, that probably would have been a deal breaker for everybody. So it's good. I'm really, I'm pleased with the acquisition. I'm pleased that, what's really happened for us at CQG now is we're part of a bigger organisation that still holds the same values, and that's important for us. Yep.
So, Greg, you completed your PhD on the lived experience of client-side project managers in the Australian construction sector. For someone who hasn't come across the term before, what is client-side project management? What is client-side project management, and why does it matter so much to how projects are delivered?
It's a good question, Rebecca. I think, look, for me, and the title of the thesis is quite a mouthful, but for probably, I'd say 10 years, when I was with a company called Point Project Management and then RPS, and where Doug and I met, we were client-side project managers. And if I told people I was a client-side project manager, they had no idea what that meant. And so for me, the role of client-side project manager is actually, it's quite a strategic role. It's quite critical in making sure projects achieve what they were designed to achieve. But there was no research out there, and there was no definition of what that was, and people would just sort of use the term without really saying, what is it and what's it do. So the basis for my PhD was really to try and clarify that, and to show how a client-side project manager is different to, say, a project-based project manager or a contractor-side project manager. But if I could put it in simple terms, a client-side project manager, their core function is to protect the client, whereas a contractor project manager, their core function is usually to maximize profit for a contractor. We'll often refer to contractors, project managers, as the dirty boot contractors because they're the ones that are on site doing what we would say is the real work. On the contractor side, a lot of people understand contract project management quite well. It's about making sure that everything turns up when it's supposed to. It's making sure you've got the resources there. It's making sure that, you're finding the most effective way to build. And it is a challenging role. Like, anybody who works on the contractor project management side and is good at it, I take my hat off to them, because it's a really tough gig. The client-side project manager is a bit different, whereas a contractor project manager really needs to understand construction. In my thesis, that was construction based, but they really need to understand their domain, how everything fits together, when everything needs to be there. They're juggling all sorts of stuff on the delivery side. Client-side project manager is more of a generalist, and in many ways, now that I've been through the role of firstly an executive general manager and then into the CEO role, I would look back on my research and say in many ways a client-side project manager is almost like, for want of a better word, a CEO of a project. So they need to understand strategically what's trying to be done. They need to bring the right people in at the right time. They need to have an understanding of finance. They need to have an understanding of law. I've had projects where I've had an understanding of marketing, and so it's very much a generalist role. And what the client-side project manager in trying to protect the client is to take what the client is trying to do and ensure that the project itself is delivering the outcome that they need. So, I explain it like this. When, if someone was to come to me and say, I want to build a pipeline, it's not because there's a business out there that says, you know what, we really need to own a pipeline. No, they're trying to do something with it. They're trying to get water from one end to the other, trying to get oil from one end to the other. So a client-side project manager is thinking about, is this project delivering the benefit that you wanted to get out of this? Whereas a contractor project manager would say, what size is the steel? When do I need to connect it up? Who does this? The client-side project manager is saying, is the pipeline the actual best way to do this? If so, do we need to be talking to other experts outside this world here? Do we need to get funding? Who do I need to get funding from? What sort of contracting methodology will I be using? So they will work together quite well, and sometimes almost come to blows depending on where they are in the project. But yeah, it's very different roles, and so the client side project manager really needs to be across everything. Like, it's not unusual for a client-side project manager to be the first person employed, and that can start with working up a detailed business case, feasibility studies, talking to the engineers and architects and all the disciplines that have to come in, getting the documentation together, running the procurement, then delivering the project, and then often after the project's finished, still being involved in terms like benefits realization, the final closeout, the final financial reconciliation. So yeah, it's quite a different role to the contract project manager.
I'm really interested that you did say that you can often be the first person employed on the project, and that makes complete sense. Have you ever had a situation where you've been brought in too late?
Many. And I think it's in some cases it does come from a place where people don't understand the role of a client-side project manager, and sometimes they don't understand the value that they're paying for. Client-side project managers, it's a sort of role that if you tried to explain it to someone, they would say, oh no, I can do all that myself, until they start doing it, until they get about halfway through the process and realize they've totally made a mess of this. And then you have to come in and try and fix it. And I've had a number of those in my career. It's interesting where you might submit a tender to do the job, and then people say, no, we've decided to do it ourselves, and they call you back 6 months later and say, can you do it now? And you say, yeah, but it's going to cost you twice as much because I've got to unstuff everything, and start again. But that's the challenge, right? That's to jump in the middle of something, to understand what's gone wrong, why it's gone wrong, where do we go from here? That's also part of the excitement of being in the role, really.
Absolutely. So you're both a serious researcher and someone who's grown and run a successful client-side business. So how did you trade off the commercial realities of making money with staying true to the craft of project management? And what did you learn from navigating that tension?
Yeah, good question, Rebecca. I actually, in many ways, don't feel that there ever was a trade-off. Most of the research and as I said, the long-winded title to my PhD involved this concept of the lived experience. And so what I was really trying to do in many ways was to research and understand and document what was really happening, not what we were being told should happen. And, from that, there's come a lot of, I guess, other papers and stuff where I've said, hey, listen, we keep telling ourselves this is what we're doing, but that's not what we're doing. We're actually doing this thing over here. And so those commercial trade-offs in my mind didn't actually exist. What I was trying to do is to understand how we do this better, because if I can understand how we do this better and potentially change the way we do it, then there is a financial benefit to that on the way through. And certainly there's a commercial benefit outside just the finances. In my mind, if we can, for example, find an innovative way to do something that then creates a benefit that we didn't actually think about at the start, that is the potential for growth. And it is actually the basis of one of my papers where we talked about this concept of anti-fragility and capitalizing on unexpected risks or unexpected circumstances on the way through. So my intention really in doing all of that research, I was a practicing client-side project manager, and at that stage an executive general manager for RPS. So I had a couple of hundred project managers under me in the consulting world. It was trying to understand what exactly are we doing, and if I can get a better understanding of what we're actually doing, not what we think we're doing, then we can start to develop better ways to do that. And a classic example, I guess, in real world is actually Doug and what he's done in Mastt, and the development of that system in Mastt is essentially Doug answering the same sort of questions, and he's commercialized it into the Mastt program. But it's basically coming from the same space and saying this doesn't, what we're being taught to do in university and what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis are not the same things. And the minute that we can actually work out what they are, we can either commercialize that, or we can improve the process, or create efficiency, or innovate on the way through.
And you've developed this term, the project management yin-yang. Do you want to talk about that and how that might relate to what you've just covered there as well?
Yeah, it was almost accidental coming up with that. So I have two examples that really drove this home to me, and one I call the disappointing failure, and the other one is the disappointing success and the exciting failure. The disappointing success is a classic example, and is probably embryonic really in my research, where I had a project. We had done everything right. We've got the cost plan, we've got the program, we've got everything set up. We've got the at that stage we had already gone out to tender, and we had a contractor on site. This is a defence project, and this is back during one of the semi-recessions we had. Julia Gillard decided that she was going to cut millions and millions of dollars out of defence construction, but we were already underway. So we had a project that we had developed for about $12.5 million that then got cut down to $8 million in flight while we were building it. And it really took a heck of a lot of work for us to get that over the line. We ended up coming in under budget, and I think 2 days ahead of the program that was revised with the new scope. And at the end of it, the feedback that we got was, wow, this is really disappointing. This project does nothing like what it was supposed to do. I haven't got any of the stuff I thought I was going to do at the start. And we're sitting there as a project manager saying, do you have any idea how hard we had to scramble to even get this across the line? So I'm looking at that and saying everything in the project management world tells me I should be walking away from this, patting myself on the back, saying this is successful. But I've got stakeholders telling me that they're really unhappy with the outcome. So that was the disappointing success from a purely project management perspective. And the other one, I won't name the company or the organisation, they had brought us in to do a feasibility study. They wanted to develop a block of land, consolidate a bunch of parcels of land they had in an area, and they wanted to create an intergenerational development site that was mixed. So it was aged care and childcare and commercial and all that sort of stuff. So from memory, I think they had given us about $1.2 million to develop up the feasibility. And they'd given us on 6 months to do it. So due to my really good project management skills, that thing ended up costing us $3 million and took over 1.5 years to do. So from purely from project management, if I was to take the hardcore project management viewpoint, that was a complete failure. Way over budget, way too long. The clients absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved the process that we went through. Ended up giving us 13 new projects on the back of it. So I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell is going on here? And that's when I sort of twigged to this idea that there is a yin and yang going on. So I'm probably going to get these wrong. It's a while since I wrote it, but the yang is in the philosophy is a masculine term. It's the hard, objective sort of stuff, and then the yin is the feminine. It's the understanding of what we would now call non-intrinsic value. So the value that we give to something that, it can't be measured. It's a non-objective thing. And so this whole concept of yin and yang is around balancing those. So understanding that doing everything right according to the project management framework, driving people hard, getting them all the way through, they can still be very upset even though you're successful. The other side of it, and in my understanding, far more important as I go through this, is bringing your stakeholders along for a journey. So it's no longer about, did I objectively deliver what you asked me to? It's, have you enjoyed the experience on the way through, and have I made you an integral part of that experience? So it aligns with some research I did called the final convergence theory, which is I don't actually need to deliver what a client's asked me to deliver. What I need to deliver is what they need at the end even if they didn't know what it was at the start, which it sounds strange, but it just got reinforced time and time again in my experience, where they say they want one thing, but things happen along the way, the tiles are not available, or, the weather's done this or whatever. And so what we do as project managers, instead of just driving home that single point to start with, we actually start to move through a path that didn't exist at the beginning. And we can end up somewhere where they didn't really expect to go, but that they're very happy with at the end. And so a lot of my research has been around how do we quantify that? How do we explain what we're doing? Now, the flip side of that is people say, "Oh, you're just got hands off the wheel and let it roll through, and whatever happens happens." But that's not true. Project managers, their core function, I now believe, is to create that path through obstacles that no one knew existed when you started, and to do it in such a way that people don't feel afraid or frightened or overly surprised at what's happened. And then from that, you get them to where they wanted to go, not because they specifically needed, quote unquote, the pipe. What they needed was to get the water from that end to that end. And so when I give you the water at that end, and you've understood how we've had to do that, and you've understood the challenges that we faced along the way, when I give you that water, you go, wow, that was fantastic. Thanks very much. Yeah, so that's the sort of the yin-yang thing, but it does tie into a lot of my other research. It became sort of a core idea that we're trying to balance both project success and client satisfaction on the way through. And the client satisfaction is probably one of the least understood and least documented in the whole process. And in my mind, it's probably the most important. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote a book called Project Management in the 21st Century, and one of the key things I talk about in that is in the client-side project manager role, one of the worst things you can do is try to insulate your client from all the challenges that you're facing. What you do is you strategically bring them into the conversation, and you say, hey, listen, this has just happened. Now, of course, you don't just turn up and say, can you fix it, client? You say, this is what's happened. There are 3 options for us to go down. This one will take us here, but will be this late. This one will go over here, but it'll cost you an extra $1 million. And this one over here will deliver on time, but you won't get the outcome that you wanted. And I use the term optioneering. You create the options in a scientific way or a disciplined way to get them to where they're going. But because they're involved in that process of, well, we made this decision on the way through, so therefore the outcome's going to be different. I made this decision over here, so the outcome's going to be different. So when you deliver them a different outcome at the end, they're not surprised by it, and they feel that these have all been their decisions on the way through. That's the strategic part. That's the difficult challenge on the way through. Because if you don't tell them what you're doing and you end up delivering something completely different or even marginally different, they can get really upset because they don't know why they've got this outcome. But if on the way through you have brought them in, discussed how this is going to happen, talked to them about the options, given them the choice, they are making a decision at that point in time to change an outcome rather than having it thrust on them. So that to me that is a core role in client-side project management, and one that we don't really understand. I think it's the most underwhelming superpower we have. Just that idea that I don't need to protect you from everything here. I just need to guide you through it.
Which links really well to my next question. So you've done a lot of work on how project managers respond to disruptions and unexpected events. What are the most common mistakes you see project managers make when things go sideways, and what does a better response actually look like?
I think one of the most common mistakes that we make is we believe what they taught us in uni about project management. So when we're talking about projects, I use the term equifinial, which means there is multiple ways to get to the end. What we do, and it's one of the things that project management told they should always do, is one of the very first things we'll put together is a Gantt chart, and it'll be as detailed as we can possibly make it to show that we've thought about everything. The Gantt chart that you draw on the day is the biggest work of fiction that you'll ever create. I think it was Dwight Eisenhower that said, planning is everything, but plans are useless. So the biggest mistake we make is we think if we've done planning up front, that is the only way this project could go. And then we make our second mistake, which is thinking that somehow we can control the project. We don't control the project. All we do is manage a project on the way through. So, and time again, you'll see project managers, and this is part of my research when I said to them, do you create a Gantt chart? 100%, yes, every single time. Do you change that Gantt chart? Yes, 100% every single time. So why do you think that Gantt chart is the most important artifact in the process? So yeah, so going back, what does that mean? What's the biggest mistake we make? I think the biggest mistake we make is we think we can predict the future. And then we try to drive everybody according to one possible way to achieve an outcome. Whereas the reality is that there is any number of ways to deliver a project. There's no right way to deliver a project. All you need to do really is to make sure you don't blow the budget, make sure you get there on time and give them what they wanted. How you achieve that is completely up to you. And how you achieve that, it can be completely impacted by events that are outside your control. So stop trying to plan this thing from start to finish and stop trying to control it as if you're working in a stable environment. We're not. We're in a dynamic, what they call a VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's the nature of projects because projects by very definition are temporary endeavors that deliver a unique outcome. Well, if it's unique, no one's ever done this before, even though it looks like they might have. And so we need to be very much agile in our thinking, and our focus needs to always be, how am I going to get what I want with the information I know today? And then I replan every day as new information comes in. That doesn't go down well in current project management academia, because they keep relying on systems and frameworks that developed back in the 1950s to work out how best to put a production factory together. This goes to the absolute fundamental theories of project management. So a guy by the name of Schuhart, who is the guy who is the father of statistical quality. So he's the one who talks about Six Sigma and all that. That's all come from him. Now, he was able to do what he did because he worked in a factory, and in one particular case, he did 50,000 cuts on a single steel bar to work out what's the biggest speed rotation, how fast should we drop this, how fast do I feed the steel in. That's great if I work in an environment where I can do the thing 50,000 times, but in a project, I get one shot while we're moving. I'm literally building the plane while we're flying it. So the fundamental theories are problematic in what we do. That's not suggesting we throw quality out. It's just saying, hey, listen, there's another way to do this. We've got to think about different ways to do this. Same with the Gantt chart, same with programming. All this stuff is built for static environments, but delivered in dynamic environments. And so we have to think differently about what we're doing.
And so when you're hiring somebody into a role to support you in a project, what sort of characteristics are you looking for then, based on what you've just said?
Yeah, okay. Well, good. It's a good question. I think it depends entirely on where I want to put them in the organisation, for starters. But first and foremost, and this might sound strange because it's not really what you would think of the project manager, I'm looking at how well they communicate. I'm looking at how, can they explain complex issues, not dumb it down, but explain in such a way that they communicate to people in their framework. Yes, I need to know if they've done projects before, because that's generally, that's the coal face in delivering. But are they flexible in their thinking? How do they handle the new challenge or the new information that's just come in? How resilient are they? There's very few things in this world that's harder than getting the project together and saying, right, this is all ready to go, and then Julia Gillard turns up and cuts billions of dollars out of your budget. And yesterday you're thinking, hey, this is great, and today thinking, I have nowhere to start. I don't know where to start today. So it's that attitude of, yes, I can get this done. It's one of the things I do in a presentation on project management, that one of the very first steps in project management is that, crap, I don't know what to do. And every project manager is the same. The first time you get given a project, it's like, I have no idea what to do here. So you can either panic and go into, meltdown, or you can start to think, well, what should I do first? And then delivering that project is really answering that question. What do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? Don't, I was going to say, don't advertise this to everybody, but, one of the things I tell young project managers, you don't need to know how to deliver this whole project. You just need to be 2 weeks ahead of your client. So when they say, this has just happened, you say, yeah, no, I know about that. Here's the Gantt chart to get you through that. This is the impacts of that. How can I possibly know what's going to be happening in 6 months from now on $1 million, multi-million-dollar build? But I can foresee what could happen in the next 2 weeks. And so I need to be there before the client and tell them that it's a possibility it's going to happen, and show them the plan that I've got to get them through if it does happen. And most of the time they're like, yeah, great, keep going. But if that happened and I didn't have a plan, they'd be like, what am I paying you for? So it's that ability to think ahead. What would my options be if it happened? What would my next step be? And it's that being able to see a bit in advance of where you are. That does come with experience. It does come with being in the industry, but also that resilience that says, no, I can fix this. I didn't know this was a problem yesterday. I know it's a problem now, but I can fix this. Maybe that's unduly warranted. Or maybe that's why project managers sort of walk around like they think they can fix everything. But anyway,
it almost ties back to your yin or yang, where it's the balance of understanding the risks so that you can plan for what could happen, but then also being able to balance that with not being too dramatic if something does happen and to just fix it.
Absolutely. So the definition of risk is the impact of uncertainty. So we always think in risk in terms of, the hazards, but the definition of risk also entails opportunity. Mm-hmm. So the impact of uncertainty. I didn't know this yesterday. And this goes to a couple of most recent papers I've written around this concept of anti-fragility, which is Nassim Taleb's theory of anti-fragility. It's that I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't plan for that, what's going to happen. This has now given me new information. What if I started today with that information, what could I do? And if we reverse that and we're always only thinking about, oh no, it's a risk, and oh no, it's a hazard, and oh, what do we do here? We get into this defense mentality where what could be happening is you could be being presented with new information that creates the biggest possibility that ever happened in this project. But you need to be in the right mindset to say, oh, hang on, this is actually not devastating. This just told us this and this and this, which we didn't know before, which means I can now do that I hadn't thought of before. So that's the mindset I think that goes with a good client-side project manager. It's not to put a positive or negative value on the information that you've just got that you didn't have yesterday. It's to be open-minded as to what that could mean. And so if that new information has come in, what does it mean? And is there an option here where I can benefit from that I didn't have yesterday?
Very good. So I want to ask you a little bit about reporting and visibility if I can. So can you walk us through a specific project or situation where having better reporting or visibility made a real difference to the outcome for your client?
I can tell you one where we did the modelling and business case, and I don't know if it was better for the client or not, but what happened is they had, and I won't name names, it was a transport project, and they had a very specific outcome they wanted to deliver, and so they wanted to build this facility. And we sat down and started doing some modelling for them, and we looked at timeframes and costs, and what would they all look like. And in doing that, the project team came to the point where we said, you don't actually want to do this project. This is not what you want to do. And in terms of reporting and visibility, we hadn't got to the point of putting that reporting and visibility in, but it's the same sort of process, right? It's that quantifying, it's the data, it's the visualization of that data. And what we said was, you told me that your outcome is this, and you jumped straight to this facility to be the outcome. You can do that with these three things that'll cost you about half, and you don't need to build anything. Which, great from a client point of view, great from a project management point of view, terrible from a consultancy point of view, because I just talked myself out of a job. But it's that the data's always there. It's out there. What we need to do is somehow bring all that together to a point where we can use that data to tell a story. And again, this goes to this whole idea we've been talking about, the yin and the yang, the storytelling, the risks, all that sort of stuff. If we can get that information early enough and we can quantify what we're looking at, then we can have conversations that give us that idea of optioneering, because we can say, this is where you're sitting right now. This is what will happen if you continue on that path. That will be the outcome of that. Or we can shift this over here. It'll take X extra weeks, extra weeks to do, but you'll get your outcome and you possibly save money, or I can spend more money and I'll do that. So getting that information together, first of all, gives you the ability to forecast what you're going to do. But the other part of project management that we can't forget is we have been entrusted with people's money and time, and we need to be able to report on that very, very clearly. One of the challenges that I have found in different project management spaces I've walked in is a lack of discipline around cost planning, a lack of discipline around programming, which seems incredible because that's the core of what we do in terms of hardcore skills. But I'm an absolute big believer in give me as much information as I can. Like, where are we today in terms of this cost? And then I can run risk scenarios. I can run option scenarios. What happens if I did this? What happens if I did that? If I can accelerate this program, for example, by 3 weeks, it's going to cost me this much to do, but might save you X number of dollars at the end. And you can't do that without good reporting and good data visualization. And the reporting for me also goes back to this whole idea that we are there to protect our clients in the client-side management role. So we need to be giving them clear information, clear reports that says, I've got this under control. I know what I'm doing. You don't need to worry about this. If you don't do that, and if you don't have those reports in place, and I have done a number of projects on this recently where I have come in and they've been going for months with no reporting. The clients are, at the point of saying, you're out the door, we're sick of you. And something as simple as doing a monthly report that says, we did this last month, we're going to do that next month, we're at this place with our costs, we've got that much risk, and we've got this much time left to go. And they're like, oh, okay, you've got this, I don't need to worry about it anymore. So you remove that uncertainty, you remove the fear. One of the reasons that we're actually employed as project managers is because when other people get projects, they don't know what to do, and they're wanting you to take that burden from them. And we've got systems and tools and frameworks to do all that. So it doesn't bother us that much because we're trained to do it. But fundamentally, what our job is to remove the uncertainty and the fear from what is going on in that project and to give you the sense, I've got this under control. Now, whether or not we do is a completely different discussion, but I give you the sense that I've got it under control. And that's the reporting side of it. That's why, having that information at hand is so important when a client rings and you can answer the question straight away. Yes, I knew that was coming. Yes, it's going to cost you about this. It'll take you an extra 3 weeks. Did you want to do that? Fundamental.
Absolutely. And I'm so pleased that you brought up data in your answer, because that does really lead to where I'd like to have a quick chat before we finish up with our discussion around AI. So I understand you've been researching and writing about AI for many years. Where do you see it genuinely adding value for project managers today, and where should the industry be quite cautious, do you think?
Short answer is I don't know. I'm a bit of a AI disciple, to be honest. I'll use it for anything I can use it for. Mad keen on ChatGPT. Used it so much this morning. I think where I use it is to synthesize big amounts of information very quickly and say, what are the 3 things I should be worried about here? Or what are the if with all these reports that have just come in, is there anything in these reports that is inconsistent? Same with contracts. I've got this contract from this person, this contract from this person, this contract from this person. Load them in. I will say it's enterprise, not open source. Load them in and say, where are the inconsistencies in this contract, and what wording should I put into each different contract to line them up? So that's how I use it currently. I've also been using it to develop presentations and all that sort of stuff on the way through. So I think where is it going to be useful? It's going to be useful in areas that I would currently use an assistant project manager in. Can you get those minutes ready? Can you read that report for me? Can you summarize this? So that's going to be challenging moving forward into the future, because that's the training ground in the industry. From what I've seen, I know there's a number of companies out there that are saying that they can use AI to create the Gantt charts or do all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure we're near that yet, and I would be very hesitant to use AI in anything that does actually require, some good knowledge about your domain, in your particular area. So for me, it's construction, but, IT or whatever. In that, the way that I have seen it used, it can come up with information that looks, to someone who don't know anything about the industry, it looks credible. But the moment you put it in front of someone who's had some experience or got some background, you just go, they're so far wrong, I don't even know where to start. So great for synthesizing information. I don't think we get as far along in the project management space in the next 5 years as people had thought. And I actually did some a research paper with a guy by the name of Lockie Nimmo, who was also ex-RPS, and we looked at what the universities were teaching in the project management space in and around artificial intelligence, and how quickly that was being taken up, and whether or not we thought the construction industry would get on board. And we found it was close to like 70, 72, 73% of what was being said about what AI could do probably 5 to 10 years away in the industry, because people were talking about, we're going to be able to do this and do that, and so this was written probably 3 or 4 years ago. We are starting to see some stuff. We talked in the construction industry about the use of robotics, remote monitoring in buildings and in waterways and all that sort of stuff. We are starting to see that now, but I don't see it doing the intellectual heavy lifting in the domain around what a project manager can do, because, as I said right at the start, project management is about reacting to the new information you got today that you didn't have yesterday. And I don't know that AI is at the point where it handles that sort of ambiguity well. It seems to go well when it's been trained to do a certain thing, but when it's like, oh, that's a piece of information I didn't know what to do with. So it's either going to integrate it incorrectly or completely ignore it, is what I've seen to date. So it'd be interesting to see where it goes. Big question, but probably better to ask Elon Musk than me about where we're headed with that one.
Very good. And look, I think we'll have to wrap it up here now, but you've been so generous with your time. Thank you very much, Greg. I know I have learnt so much from this discussion today, and I'm sure everybody who watches it will really value all of the experience that you shared as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rebecca. It's been great to be here, and good to hear that Doug's doing well, and I know Mastt is going from strength to strength, so more power to him.
Wonderful.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to know more about construction and get all the professional tips, tricks, and AI advice from real construction project managers, follow this channel for more insights.